Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another Top Cut breakdown video. Today we're covering the Philly regional that took place at the TooManyGames con in Philadelphia. Going over the end of the week this time. I know it's a little bit different than I normally do it, but I figured this time around I would try getting the deck profiles out first and then doing the event recap later, because the deck profiles are more relevant towards the beginning of the week, I find, and the metadata is kind of always relevant, at least going into the next event, right? So I figure right now we'll talk about the decks, talk about the strategies, and we'll talk about kind of how the meta is evolving. Let me know if you like this kind of format where I do the profiles in the beginning of the week and I do the recap at the end of the week. Let me know in the comments. But anyways, let's get into this. All right, so we have this excellent graphic by PPG, and once again, guys, I know I did it a million times, but shout out to PPG for hosting an incredible event. I mean, super smooth. Absolutely loved it. So we have the top 16 here. We had about 110-ish players, I believe, and that's a pretty good turnout, especially for a con where the entry was rather expensive because you had to pay a $30 tournament fee. That's normal. Then you also had to pay your entry into the con, which is a little bit rough. I did a whole Facebook post about my thoughts on that. Overall, tournament was great. Structure was cool. I like pre-side best of one and best of three Top Cut. I think was really cool as well, like implementing that in Top Cut. But yeah, hopefully not every single event going forward is at a con. But anyways, going into the meta here, we have Bulma taking first place. Only one Bulma in the top 16. And that's probably because this was much more of a sleeper pick. We had been testing it for quite a few weeks going into this tournament. We've actually been on the deck for quite a while, and we weren't really sure when we wanted to kind of unveil it at a tournament. But Mike Ricciuti, the mastermind behind the deck, kind of finally just said, I don't have plans to play this later on. Let's just do it at Philly. And Danny ended up playing it and practicing it and taking the tournament by storm, which was crazy. Bulma is not really anything special when it comes to its offenses. I mean, it leans very heavily into the GT Trio 8-drop and the Vegeta SCR, which is just a incredibly broken card. But besides those two things and the baby unison, I guess, the deck is not really doing anything crazy offensively. It's defensively where the leader and the strategy is actually broken. I'll give you guys my opinion on it. I really think this leader should be handled in a similar way to the Android 18 mill deck that was handled recently. Because, one, there's lots of unintended interactions. You have the Videl, the blonde Super Saiyan Videl, Miraculous 8, I think. You have her just recycling your super combos. So Danny said in his profile where he's super comboing upwards of 10 times per game. That can't be right. That can't be intended, right? That's just insane. With Raditz super combo just cycling as much as it does, that can't be okay, right? Besides that, you have just infinite defense in the deck between your various negates, Topo, Violent Rays, and you have, of course, all your blockers. You have the Android 17 Rebel Reinforcements recycling your blockers, specifically recycling that Videl that will then pick you up super combos. It's just very degenerate forms of defense, and it's the closest thing in this game that I think we've ever had to like an infinite loop, and it's not near an infinite loop, but it's very close, right, to where their defenses never run out. And the facts that we have Secret Identity Masked Sand now on the ban list and Fu Shrouded Mystery on the ban list makes it very difficult to interact with these boards. Yes, there's things like Kami, but Bunny Girl Bulma pretty much nullifies that as much as it nullifies any other board wipe. So yeah, this is something that I think should be addressed sooner rather than later. Again, not because it's oppressive offensively, but because it creates a very unfun play environment where your opponent can literally just infinitely defend into time or into milling you out, or they could potentially just beat you down with their boss monsters. But honestly, a lot of the time that's not really the strategy with Bulma. I wanted to just give my 2 cents on it. If it needs to be a bigger thing, I can maybe do an entire video just talking about the problems with a deck like Bulma existing in the game, but I mean, that's just my thoughts on it. But anyways, we have Gamma 1 and 2 being the most highly repped deck in top 16, and this deck kind of comes out of nowhere because we've had a few tournaments in the Ultimate Squad format, right? And Gamma was not nearly as prevalent, but almost every single Gamma that entered the tournament, from what I understand, there was maybe like 6 Gammas in the room. Most of them made a top cut, which just kind of shows you the power of the deck. The conversion rate is absolutely insane. Gamma is a crazy strong deck, though. I mean, you have all your battle cards being played out of the energy. We already know that's strong from Android 16 doing its thing for a few sets now. And Gamma has the added ability of just getting a ton of defense for the opponent's turn. And yes, you are locked into Android effects, but they gave Gamma everything it needed, right? They already had the Android 18 counterplay that deals with basically anything 4 or less your opponent plays. You've also got the Android 14 or 15, right? Whichever one it is. The Floodgate negate that makes your opponent bottom deck 2 cards as they want to continue attacking. You've just got all these good defensive Android cards that the restriction of being an Android only effect doesn't really matter all that much. So Gamma looking very, very strong going forward. Then we have Trunks Vegeta, just another really solid deck. I could definitely see a triangular sort of format where it can be like Gamma Trunks +1. Trunks is just very good, very consistent. The deck just does what it does. It draws an insane amount of cards when you are able to evolve every turn. But the wacky thing about the deck is, and I just know this from experience from playing it, because I was one of these top 16 Trunks Vegeta players, it is very reliant on your turn 1 going well, and that's basically just seeing a Trunks or a Vegeta 1-drop, or I guess a Bulma to hopefully find your Trunks or Vegeta off top 7. But yeah, Trunks Vegeta is very, very good. Gonna be the premier yellow deck in my opinion. The thing about Sen Shenron, just talking about premier yellow decks, every single deck in the game for the most part can now answer the 9-drop Sen Shenron very, very easily. So that card just becomes a lot less effective in the format. And yes, like, if that card's allowed to go unchecked, it's very, very oppressive in that it negates every single battle card you play for a turn. But yeah, every single deck in their main kit for the most part, without having to tech anything special, can pretty much kill the Sin 9-drop. So that's really good. Going against Sin, I guess, for pretty much every other deck. Then we have Cooler being the next most highly repped deck. Cooler solid. I'll be honest, I personally would not want to take Cooler into a BO3 or Cyborg Best of 1 event, because I just don't want to deal with being Deborah'd all day or having anti-hand control cards used against me all day. But I mean, there is a logic, and I talked to Imani Edwards, who was one of the players here that topped with Cooler. He's a great, great player. He just mentioned that a lot of these decks don't always have the energy available to use Deborah, and you're able to catch them on turns like that, because Cooler doesn't always have to take cards away from the opponent, right? You can kind of sequence your turns to where you're playing your Frieza Unison, you're playing your Cooler 4-drop on turns where your opponent's tapped out, or maybe they need the energy open for a negate, right? So you can even kind of put them in this catch-22 where you use a hand-ripping effect, and maybe it's their last energy, they use a Deborah, well, now they're tapped out. So maybe you have the availability to go for game with your triple strike, dual attack, Frieza Unison, or all your other various double strikers or big attackers in the deck, right? So that's kind of like the mind game and the line you can walk when you're playing with your opponents in this matchup. So I think the Cooler's super solid deck. Honestly, it's really, really cool to see green kind of just make its way back into the meta. I do really like that. And then we'll just skip ahead to One Cell Reboot, just talking more about green. I mean, this deck is like Sin in the sense that, yeah, it's technically a green deck, but the deck just has one singular strategy, and that's not necessarily anything intrinsic to green, except for the fact that it relies on Perfect Force Cell to win the game. But you could have technically made Cell any color and it would probably do the same thing, right? So yeah, Cell being a green deck, it's pretty cool that green has 2 solid contenders that are able to do really significant things in this format. But yeah, I've got a whole video on countering Cell, and I should have also mentioned too that I've got my teammate Justin's Gamma profile here on the channel from earlier this week. I've got my top 16 yellow Trunks profile. I do of course have Danny's first place Bulma list here on the channel, so yeah, that's why I wanted to get the profiles kind of out of the way earlier, get you guys that relevant info, and now we'll just talk about the meta and where things may go. So going back into the singletons, we have one SS3 reboot. So this is pretty cool because I actually played against this player in the Team War event, and he actually ended up getting the game off me. Very good player, very good deck. SS3 is kind of a different blue deck. When you're looking at blue decks, you're looking at Gamma, which is like kind of a little bit of a lower to the ground deck. You have a lot of 1-drops that come out of your energy, but of course you also have the Cell Boss Monster that's solid out of the energy for 4, right? When you're looking at other blue decks, like maybe SS4 Ramp, or maybe Soul Striker, maybe some other forms of like just generic mono blue leaders, you're looking at decks that typically want to go late game and play bombs like Kale or bombs like Turning the Tide. SS3 isn't able to do that because you can't go past 6 energy. So SS3 has to play a little bit more of like, I guess, a literal mid-range blue game where you are definitely relying on a lot of floodgates because your leader gives you 3 energy back per turn, but you're also leaning pretty heavily into SSG Goku Miraculous Transformation as well as Golden 8 Great Avenger to kind of close out games, right? You don't have like necessarily this huge bomb that has a game-ending effect, but you do have access to lots of really good blue cards and the amount of energy to use them effectively, which is pretty solid. And I should have mentioned in the beginning too that all the deck lists are going to be down in the description below. PPG once again doing an awesome job just collecting all his deck lists, posting them for us to see. Excellent TO. I can't say enough good things about them. But anyways, one U7 Goku. I think the most surprising thing about U7 Goku was just the fact that not more of it was found in Top Cut, right? Like, I think a lot of people were going into this weekend aiming to counter U7, which I think is rightfully so. I mean, the deck is just very, very powerful. One of the best red decks, if not the best red deck. A lot of decks are going in to counter this, and how are they doing that? You have your anti-aggression cards, so you've got your various floodgates, but you got to be a little bit careful to run floodgates that don't fall prey to Vegeta Resolve Renewed. But we've seen a lot of that, right? Like in yellow, for example, you've got Forbidden Power. In red mirrors, you've got Topo, which is kind of actually difficult to answer if you're playing red. And then, of course, you got your various answers to the Goku Ultra Mastery. So, Gamma and Blue decks, for example, can play Dirty Burst. Yellow can play Mutaito because that ruling was actually rectified, which I talked about in my Vegeta profile, my Trunks Vegeta profile, if you guys want to check that out. Mutaito is a good answer to Ultra Mastery. SSB Vegeta SCR, still going to run Terror in this format. That card alone is wiping the entire board, including Unisons, and making it easier to go for game on your opponent while their leader's 10k. Is insanely powerful. U7 is the most consistent deck at finding that secret rare, so that's always going to be a good thing. But yeah, I think just we're kind of seeing this revolving door meta where a deck like U7 comes in, reigns supreme for the first couple weeks. Now decks are very well equipped to deal with the things that it's doing, and we're going to see it be a little bit less popular until we see those texts and those answers kind of come out of people's decks, and then we see these things kind of roll back in, like U7 become popular again. I can totally see a revolving door meta like that. And then finally, we have the 1GT. I do have Frank's profile here on the channel. Shout out to him for also topping the event. We put a lot of guys in Top Cut this weekend. That felt really, really good, as well as taking a first place. But yeah, GT, really solid. I actually personally like GT quite a bit. My only hesitation with playing the deck is that I'm a little bit fearful of my opponent having the ability to deal with my Unison, whether that's the cooler matchup and they're playing Kibito Kai, or they're playing the Supreme Kai of Time SCR randomly. I mean, honestly, out of all these decks in the top 16, not a single one should be playing Kai SCR, which is kind of funny to think about. I mean, I guess maybe like Cell Reboot could play it, but realistically, you're just playing Cell Xeno, right? So, yeah, every single one of these decks should not be playing Kai SCR, which I guess is a good thing for GT, but you'll run into a problem with the red mirrors where they have the Vegeta SCR wiping your Unison. That's going to be pretty annoying, again, especially when it's U7. They can very consistently find that SCR. That could be a bit of a problem. But anyways, guys, that's my thoughts here. So with Gamma and Trunks being so popular, I mean, that hasn't really changed. Trunks has been a very popular one for quite some time. That one is going to be just like a good amount of barrier removal is going to help you out. Gamma is a little bit tougher to specifically side for, because you want to do two things. One, you want to be able to deal with their low to the ground pressure, right? And you can do that with cards that are kind of like Senzu Bean, like maybe Protector of the People type cards, because they can go with a lot of battle card attacks relatively early. You also want to have certain answers to their Cell 9 drop, but that one's a little bit tougher because it does have Deflect. And now, for example, if you were playing yellow, right, Mutaito wouldn't actually work on the Cell 9 drop, because the Cell 9 drop is an auto that wipes the board. So basically, you'd counterplay with Mutaito. It doesn't matter if it's window 1 or window 2. You would counterplay with Mutaito. They would play their Cell, their turn player, their auto resolves first, and then they would put your Mutaito to the bottom of the deck, which would not allow it to sacrifice itself to then rest the Cell, right? Just a bit of a ruling thing for you guys there. But yeah, that's going to be a little bit tougher one to answer. Blue mirror matches can do it well because of Dirty Burst. Green is going to have a really tough time dealing with Cell because Charismatic Villain can't hit it, and none of their negates can really stop it all that effectively. Red can maybe do some things to it. Videl does make it a little bit less threatening because it brings down to 10k, which is pretty good. So yeah, Gamma might be the next one that everyone aims to deal with. Maybe I'll do a counter video against Gamma coming up soon. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see that. Bulma, I'm really interested to see if at Otakon and Anime North, if this deck ends up reigning terror, or people really do find the text. I know I kind of ranted earlier about Bulma and why I don't think it should exist in the game, and I still believe in that wholeheartedly. But of course, there are texts and there are strategies that can beat it. But I think when you're looking for these texts and strategies to beat Bulma, we're really devolving into some very unfun play patterns, because burn decks can beat it because you don't have to attack to do damage, but then you're looking at, you know, playing these really kind of unfun burn decks, right? So there's problems like that that I don't think anyone really needs to deal with. But yeah, just my thoughts on the meta, guys. Of course, as always, let me know in the comments below what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.